You are about to journey against the current of contemporary thought and beyond the troubled waters of daily news to the very source of our extraordinary culture. You are going upstream with Cashill and Edge.
Hey, welcome world. We are back here live, more or less.
Jack.
Upstream with Cashill and Edge. Broadcast from the luxurious studios of
Real Media
in Overland Park, Kansas, a Kansas City suburb, central to the whole world.
This is a great facility.
Actually, it is, and they have great people here.
Full sound stage.
Yep.
Got it, the whole deal.
And they're tolerant of us.
They are.
Which is not necessarily the norm in the world of...
Hell, they even encourage us.
Yeah.
Which is really weird.
Yeah, they enable us.
Good word, Jack.
That
fits into what we're talking about. How much things change, but yet how much they stay the same.
No, and Mr. Peabody and Sherman will be taking you back about 50 years today.
Sherman, what are you doing? Golly, Mr. Peabody, I'm looking at Life magazines from 1972.
Oh,
and boy, is it weird.
It is. In 1972, Life was still the dominant pictorial magazine, and it set the stage, for a lot of what happened in American life. Henry Luce was hugely influential, powerful guy.
There was another one we forgot to mention last time. Look.
Look was the Pepsi.
Yeah.
To Life's Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
It was the Avis to Life's Hertz. It was always that second place kind of imitator.
Yeah.
That was not without its own reach, but it
was the us to people.
The us to people. There we are.
We're talking trashy magazines.
The Globe to National Enquirer, right?
World Weekly Review.
The Hustler to Playboy.
Oh, man.
Yeah. But
High Society.
Yeah.
I met that guy, by the way.
Who's that? Flint?
No, the other one. Flint's arch enemy, the publisher of High Society.
What was his name?
I don't remember. But I sat in his office and where was it? It was in Florida.
Yeah.
And I got brought into this meeting and I didn't really know what was going on, but it was a bizarre place. This guy walks in. He looked like who's the Saturday Night? Martin Short.
Right.
When he does his sleazy characters.
Yeah.
Like the nervous cigarette guy.
Right.
This guy looked exactly like that. Had the toupee and it was bizarre.
Now, is he part of the American media empire? That's where National Enquirer's home. No, someplace else.
No, this guy did his own thing. He did Playgirl.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, right. You've got them all down in the basement. No, go ahead. Yeah. But anyway, that was a weird rabbit hole. Forget that. I said that.
No, okay.
Let's go on
let's
to 70.
pull you out of that.
Back to 72. Here.
Tell me what you got. Show me something that happened in 72 that's worth talking about.
I was looking at, I prefer reading, 50-year-old magazines because one of the things I noticed is that the similarities between 72 and now are really weird.
Yes.
There are articles in the 72 Life magazine, photos. We had a crisis on the border, and they referred to it as an emergency.
Yeah.
There was an invasion of illegal aliens, and it was happening on a daily basis, and they were fighting it and trying to stop it, and they were selling drugs, and they were sneaking in the country illegally, and they were bringing, there were prostitutes. I could have read the first two paragraphs with all the who, what, where, when, why, and how. Right down to when it was getting into the details.
Where it says 5 or 10 people are crossing every day.
And you would have thought it was ripped right out of the headline.
Right.
On a right-wing media.
Yeah.
Right? It's still not on the regular mainstream media as prominently as it was in this Life magazine from 1972.
Do you remember the name of the Eisenhower program to control illegal immigration?
Operation Wetback.
Operation Wetback, right.
And of course, what I see looking at it retrospectively is I see the government's hands and the manipulation and the fact that Henry Luce,
Yeah.
was loosely attached to. He was a spook. They were all spooks, basically.
Well,
or in cahoots with the spooks.
They were in cahoots with the Spooks. There's a book title for you. His wife, of course, was a congresswoman, Claire Booth Luce. And I don't know how directly they were in cahoots, but the CIA was funding a lot of major magazines.
Yeah.
And you know what they were funding? This was curious. A lot of the liberal magazines. Because the thinking was that the CIA was always a left-leaning operation, unlike the FBI, which was a right-leaning operation. And they were of the opinion that if they could spread liberalism around the world, it would be a counter to communism. Some of them knew that they were in the same family. Some of them were just stupid enough to think that they were somehow opposite.
And some of them were just evil, power-hungry, greedy criminals.
Right. That's right. I mean, that was
a lot of them.
Well, some of them certainly.
And what I looked at it, and retrospectively, I look at this and I see a signal for money. I see them drumming up the same drama about this huge problem that, to me, now I'm going to sound like a real cruel, mean guy.
Yeah, unlike your usual cheerful, cherubic self here.
So they're whining about this, in the paper with pictures, dramatic pictures, whining. We need a lot more money to build a gigantic industry where we're peddling drugs and scamming everybody down here.
Right.
That's what I see. Now, I looked at the other issue, the Kennedy deal in 1972 was incredible what they were doing in these magazines. Making them into the American royal family. And
This is 3 years after Chappaquiddick, too.
Post-Chappaquiddick.
Yeah, right.
So they had jobs to do.
Right.
One of the jobs was to apologize to the Kennedy family because they were a little rough on them.
On Teddy?
No, on the first two they took out.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Here, we'll give you a little fluff job here because we kind of took out your first two. And Teddy, we're going to... And the job they did on Teddy, polishing him up in these articles, he looked like Superman.
Yeah.
The good boy. They had an article. They had a big feature on Rose Kennedy's 80th birthday. And what a good kid Teddy was.
Right.
You could just see it all.
Yeah.
In fact, they ought to republish all these because the information you get from looking at all these machinations 50 years later is really something.
Well, I'll tell you what, your Kennedy illusion is interesting because this cover, which I'll hold up for the cameras, and you see the article in the upper right?
How Nixon Sees His Second Term by Daniel Patrick Moynihan.
Well, the way he saw it is not exactly the way it turned out. This was 1972. This was the year of Watergate. Yes. Now, and this was after Watergate happened, actually. But Watergate in 1972 was just a minor
traction.
Right. And 2 months later, Nixon would go on to win 49 states.
Largest majority ever.
Right. And then things began to happen. And this is where...
Largest popular vote, too.
Yeah,
ever.
Yeah. This is where the Kennedy faction comes into play. Because if you like really solidly grounded conspiracies, the Kennedy conspiracy to take out Nixon is extremely well documented. And it's worth pursuing. There's a fellow I work with.
Are you talking about the first election where Kennedy beat Nixon? Or which?
No, I'm talking in 1972.
1972.
With starting with Watergate.
Okay.
I had the...
and Kennedy was behind the... What are you...
Kennedy people were in every element of that apparatus that took Nixon out.
Until they got taken out, I'm assuming.
No, not really. I don't think they were ever taken out. Not the people. In other words, I I know this from having edited a book by a guy named Jeff Shepard, who is the leading authority on Watergate. And so I, got into the book, into the details of it. He had written, this is the third of his books. This one's called The Nixon Conspiracy.
Okay.
It's the most comprehensive. And Shepard, who was a lawyer working in Nixon's administration in the White House in 1972, he's a young lawyer right out of Harvard, right? And so he got to see all of this up close. And he had one of the three books he'd written was, I think it was called The Kennedy Conspiracy. It was about how everyone involved, the people who were big names became big names during the Watergate hearings, like Archibald Cox and, I don't know, these.
Great name, by the way.
There's a great name.
I saw his pornos. They were great.
It arched. That's what made it. So it made it unusual. Judge Sirico, all the people who ran the Senate the Senate Judicial Committee, the thing was loaded with Kennedy operatives, and their goal was to take out Nixon, and they succeeded. Mm-hmm. And this is where I'd say that 72 in some ways was different. The media environment was a lot different.
Yes, it was.
And that. People, actually today people complain about the media, and the media is ridiculous today. But the media is countered today by a series of alternative media that aren't ridiculous.
Well, that was organically still the case back in 72 when they really did still have independent radio stations, TV stations, newspapers. I mean, the TV stations were networked, but they had a lot of local sway.
Well, the locals they had more autonomy than they certainly do today. Everything's packaged, including the content of the news.
So it's similar in that there's still this overpowering, giant, media conglomeration that's in bed with all these wrong people that's running the show.
Right, and so, for instance, when they decided to turn up the heat, just for those who were very young, and what happened in Watergate was a team of, actually, Nixon had formed this team, or the Nixon White House had formed a team that they called the plumbers, because their job was to find and seal the leaks that were coming out of the Nixon White House. I mean, they hated Nixon going back to the...
This is where it's very similar to what was going on with the Trump.
Oh, totally.
And it's still in all the palace intrigue that we deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, all right. That's the parallels with Trump are very strong. Nixon, they hated Richard Nixon.
They hated the guy who got more popular votes than anyone in the history of the country.
Right.
They hated him that deeply. Where have we seen that happen before?
Yeah, exactly. And they succeeded in taking him out.
Mm-hmm.
For Nixon, and we'll talk more about this next week on our next week's show. It goes back to his role. He was a freshman congressman in '46. He was good buddies with JFK. They came in together. But then he was on the House Un-American Activities Committee. And Alger Hiss, this is kind of complicated, but was a Soviet agent inside the Roosevelt administration. And he was about to be essentially exonerated when Nixon sniffed a rat, and like a ferret that he was, went after it and actually ended up killing the rat, And the left never forgave him for that. Alger Hiss ended up going to prison. He was their golden boy. And from that moment on, the media had a hard-on for Nixon. There's no doubt about it.
Well, they sure worked him over.
So then Nixon was, indefatigable, if nothing else. He keeps plugging and ends up in '68 as the candidate. He gets elected on a crazy three-way race, during which RFK is assassinated, right? Becomes president in '72. He wins 49 states. And now they're saying how Nixon sees his second term, right? Well, it didn't turn out the way he had hoped it would, because they took care. The media at that time was, like now, the major media totally in bed with the Democratic establishment, which has now controlled Congress and controlled the administrative state.
And all that implies with the
intelligence community,
yeah.
and right. So ends up being no Nixon. I would say the difference, though, and you could challenge me on this, the positive difference today is that there is an alternative media that fights against the orthodoxy of the mainstream media.
Well, I would agree with you if we're talking about the last year and a half, because it's only hit critical mass recently, where anybody except guys like you and I who are into this stuff would really be, I mean, okay, a couple years ago, I could have named you 8 or 10 alternative sites that were pretty strong.
Yeah.
A lot of those are gone now or been deplatformed or they've changed, and not a lot of people know about them.
Which ones would you cite there?
In which case?
In terms of the alternative sites that were worth something.
Okay. Infowars.com is
Right.
Alex Jones's site.
Right.
Everybody makes fun of Alex Jones.
Right.
Alex Jones, that guy down in Austin who's crazy. I don't drink as much as I used to, okay? Now, the guy's just, I mean, he's wild. But like the T-shirts that are becoming prevalent now, Alex Jones was right.
He was right about half the time.
No.
More than that, you think?
Way more than that.
No, I don't know about that. I had some run-ins with Alex Jones myself, but then again, I am a Pollyanna, so
Yeah.
I tend not to.
There is that. And then you got, right now you got Bongino's on the alternative media. It's a pretty strong voice. You got what's his name? Bannon, who is fantastic. I mean, he's really a yeoman. He's in there banging away with good information and great guests, good interviews. A lot of these are long format.
Sure.
X22 report,
Right.
and these SGT report. These are long format interview shows where you really get to hear and see people being challenged who are legitimately experts or newsworthy people.
Right.
So you don't get sound bites, you don't get headlines. So it's very hard for somebody to take somebody and browbeat them for an hour for information and have anybody look at that and go, well, that was propaganda.
Yeah.
Because you can look right in the guy's eyes
Sure,
when
right.
he's like,
Yeah. And they, of course, the propagandists are hesitant to venture onto these formats.
Yeah, they don't go there. Because if you hear them talking as they give speeches, you know they're liars because of the way they hesitate and talk.
Right.
You know they're lying out their ass.
Yeah.
Well, you're interviewing somebody and going, now, were there any agents involved in this 9/11 conspiracy? Well, I can only tell you. I mean, it wouldn't work.
Right.
They'd sound like Kamala. Everything they'd say would sound like Kamala Harris.
Right.
saying.
Right. Russia is a big country next to a small country called Ukraine. No, yes, there are, and I, I listen to a lot of them, and I usually do it through YouTube or the other places that host also Upstream with Cashill and Edge.
Yeah.
Spotify or Rumble.
Well, Trump spun off a lot of them.
Yeah.
Sebastian Gorka, the Roger Stone, they've all got podcasts.
And there are more establishment, and there's a level of establishment. There's a hierarchy within the conservative media community.
Of course.
For 30 years we took it for granted, but Rush Limbaugh was such a stabilizing, powerful force. Totally missed.
Totally missed. Love that guy.
His heir apparent, in a slightly different vein, was Tucker Carlson. Mm-hmm. And Carlson's in limbo right now. We'll see how he surfaces from that. But there are things like the Daily Wire, the Daily Signal, the Washington Free Beacon, Breitbart, and these are places with income streams and
American Thinker, where Cashill writes.
American Spectator, American Greatness, World Net Daily, the oldest of the online.
World Net Daily, where this podcast resides.
Yeah, that's right. Every Friday.
That's right.
You could find us there. So there are lots of alternative sites. There's no excuse for being not educated in ways that you could counter effectively if you're ever in a situation. The arguments being put up by people who are spewing the orthodoxy. That wasn't true in 1972.
You're right.
None of this was there in 1972.
Good point.
And so that, I remembered, I was, old enough to remember Watergate. My third grade class, no, it was not I was a little older than that. I was in graduate school at the time, and I had voted. The first time I was old enough to vote was in 1972. And I voted for this guy who was about to see his second term come to nothing. I wasn't enthusiastic, but,
Yeah, you were really an Agnew guy. That's really what carried it for you, right?
Here's Agnew. Here's the guy.
There you go. Now, there was a guy who was vilified, too.
Oh, totally.
And, when it was time for him to go,
yeah,
they were on him big time.
Well, in fact, that's a good point, because just to recite a little history, before they could take out Nixon, they had to take out Agnew. Mm-hmm. We're sort of faced with a similar question in the Democratic Party
I'm
today.
talking about.
Right.
Who do you think was least popular, Kamala or Spiro T. Agnew?
Agnew had very loyal defenders. Kamala doesn't.
Do you say Kamala?
I say because it's like they're like the first syllable of communist and Kamala go together in my mind.
That makes sense.
If I say Kamala, I feel like singing Kamala. Right?
Yeah, you're right.
And I don't want to sing on this show because it would. I think it's
you make me do it
against the law in 39 states. But you know how to sing. You sing at least halfway well.
Thanks.
I can't even bear to listen to myself sing. My brother sings like I do, as I do, and when he sings, I just want to leave the room. But we have comparable voices. Although I'm probably even better singer than he is, but it doesn't get much worse than
the
that.
Cashill brothers. I'm not looking forward to your next album.
Although my oldest brother was actually good singing and did musicals and stuff. So that gift was lost on me. In fact, if intelligence were based on musical skills, I'd been special ed from kindergarten on and never gotten out. I'd probably be like in some home somewhere, like with Rosemary Kennedy, getting lobotomized, for hoping to untap some musical genius that otherwise was lacking. No, Agnew was the pit bull. He was the Cheney. He was a lot of Republican presidents had pit bull vice presidents. Some do, I should say. Agnew was the prototype. And after 1972, he wins, and he dedicates. Right after the election, he comes to Kansas City to dedicate the new KCI airport. And then they start chipping away at Nixon. Agnew was vulnerable because he was the governor of a fairly corrupt state, Maryland, and they knew they could find something on him, and they did. They had to take him out. That way they could open the door for taking out Nixon without having Agnew ascend. So the Democratic Party now is faced with that quandary because to get rid of Biden before the election, which they'd love to do, they'd first have to take out Kamala, and that's going to be complicated unless they get her on a morals charge from sleeping around in 1960s California. But
no,
that's
they
not going to
only
happen.
do that to Republicans.
They only do that because
there's a statute of limitations for Democrats that's like that.
Right.
Oh, 1 second. Statute of limitations.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Movingon.com.org.
And if you have no morals, then you can't be accused of being a hypocrite. And that's where Republicans get hit up. So, no, my theory was, and we may have talked about this, I think they kneecapped Andrew Cuomo because he was angling for that spot.
Right.
And he was the last alpha male in the party. And
he wasn't the guy they want anyway.
No, they didn't want him. He wanted it.
Of course.
And, he was a rock star during COVID. They had the Cuomo-sexuals, a Hollywood coterie of fans.
It used to be okay just to be a criminal. You were in the club.
Yeah.
Now you got to be a criminal and a communist.
Well,
it's really hard now. It's getting tough. It's like, are you a globalist? Are you an atheist?
Right.
Are you a communist? Okay. Check, check, check.
Right. We may have room for you. So Anyhow, that's what it was like. There was a lot of angling afterwards. And that's where the whole Kennedy people owned the administrative state in 1973, 74. They were in the Senate Judiciary Committee. They were doing investigative hearings. They were in the D.C. district courts where they were charging these guys, sending them to prison for 40 years for a burglary, without, they were squeezing them. They wanted Nixon. But what made the huge difference, the total consequential difference, was that they had the Washington Post in their pocket. And the Washington Post drove the whole investigation. This is where Woodward and Bernstein.
Washington Post was in bed with Deep Throat.
Yes, FBI.
Deep Throat was FBI.
Right.
Washington Post was in bed with the FBI.
Yeah.
Period.
Well, there's the one story that's, and this is a true story. I should have prepared for this one because I had to sort of ad lib as we're doing it. Ben Bradley was the legendary editor of the Washington Post during the Watergate period. He's the guy that Jason Robards plays in the movie, and his thing was let it all hang out. That was his motto, right? Meaning let the news all hang out. And except that was entirely situational. Back to what you were saying before. Different sets of rules even then for Democrats and Republicans.
And if I were a propagandist and I needed a slogan, it would be something like that.
Yeah. And you didn't believe it for a moment.
No.
Well, the classic case of that was when JFK had a mistress who was his go-to mistress in Washington. Her husband was a CIA agent. And her name was Mary, gosh.
Tall blonde.
Yeah, Mary blank blank.
I saw her once.
And it'll come to me. Because her husband's name was very distinctive. I think she was divorced from the CIA guy. Anyhow, she's having this long-term affair with JFK. Very discreet. She's very sad. Mary Pinchot Meyer, that's her name. Pinchot was an old line insider political family. Meyer, she was married to a guy named Cord Meyer, who had been the CIA guy, literal CIA guy. Uh-huh. And do you know this story at all?
No.
It's really a great story. You should get into it because it's so up your alley of what happens. Shortly after JFK was assassinated in 1963, Mary was out for a run on the towpath along the canal there in D.C. And she was murdered, shot to death, left there on the path. And they railroaded some poor black guy, blamed him for the murder. But before we get to that, we go back to the fact that Ben Bradley was her brother-in-law. Meyer's sister was Bradley's wife, right? At the time, Bradley was the editor of Newsweek, which was part of the Washington Post family. And his first response, and he and his wife went directly to Meyer's apartment or studio, whatever she was, and looked for her diary and found her diary. Then they called in their friends from the CIA. Jesse Angleton, famous guy, James Jesse Angleton, famous CIA guy, head spook for CIA for years, immediately comes over. They find the diary and let it all hang out. Ben Bradley does what?
Buries it in a
burns
safe.
It. You don't bury it. You burn it. You incinerate it. I mean, this is a true story.
Well, Jack, that's a great story. It tells it all.
Yeah. And then Bradley goes on.
How much integrity? How much did they want to get to the truth of this issue?
Right.
Enough to take it and burn it.
Right. And then 5 years later to have the nerve to go after Nixon for covering up stuff, right? The cover-up was worse than the crime. Yeah.
Now, Hoover was gone.
Hoover was
Hoover
on the
died
way out
in his sleep.
in 1972.
In 1972.
Right.
Convenient.
Yeah.
Now this is definitely, you'd have to be conspiracy theorists to start thinking about this. You wouldn't just look at that and go, well, of course they had to get rid of Hoover
Right.
before they pulled this kind of hijinks. And he wasn't going to go anywhere. Even if he was on his deathbed, he wasn't going to leave. Right?
That's right. And not only that, but Hoover resisted Nixon's call to create a unit like the plumbers. He didn't want the FBI involved in that. Hoover was a straighter shooter than 9/10 of the people in Washington.
So he died in his sleep.
Yeah.
Maybe we should talk more about 72. I mean, George Wallace.
He was
shot in 72.
Yeah. Not killed, but
No.
crippled.
By 3 people, I think, or 2 or 3, wasn't it?
Actually, there was
Oh, they fingered one guy. What was his name?
he had one of those guys with 3 names, I think.
That's right. Well, 3 names. That's good enough.
And he had also
Wayne was probably his middle name because it always is. John Wayne Gacy.
And Nixon had been on his target list, but he, I think in Wallace's case, he was a legitimate crank. I mean, it happens. You know,
Do you?
it happens sometimes,
You think so?
occasionally, right? Not every bizarre incident is part of a larger conspiracy. Some are.
I'm going with 80% plus.
I'd say 50-50, you know. I'm still trying to figure out the Indian guy who was ramming his U-Haul into the,
With the swastika?
which the FBI laid out. You take your evidence and you lay it out.
Now
on the sidewalk.
listen, that was not. Now, you remember when those 3 big buildings were blown up down in, they crashed into?
I remember
in New
that.
York. There was something about it,
Yeah,
and how there was all that flotsam and jetsam, and
yeah.
somehow, gently coming down, fully intact, were the driver's licenses of the terrorists that they found. Amazing. It's amazing. It's just like the way that swastika got laid out there. The set designers are incredible. They got to work so hard.
Well, I would challenge you on the 9/11 stuff, but not here. But on the swastika,
Oh, no.
We know what didn't happen though, and I'm surprised that CNN was slow in the job. Why weren't they there with their cameras when the U-Haul came in? You know, I mean, they're slipping. They don't have quite the pull they did when they were pulling Roger Stone out of bed. Or
I think CNN had budget cuts.
that may be it.
Yeah. They can't-
CNN's in trouble, by the way. Their ratings are totally in
That's
the
what I
tank.
mean.
Yeah.
I don't know if they can. Hey, we got a good one for you.
Yeah,
Is Trump in it?
yeah.
No. Can't afford it. Only Trump brings us viewers.
Right. Well, in any case, Mary Pinchot, going back to finish that story, the black guy had been railroaded and he was acquitted or whatever, and they never found the killer or the motive. And that's one of those unsolved mysteries. It's a great story. A lot of people are not aware of it, but it's and it's been well corroborated. Nothing I'm saying here is even controversial. I mean, Bradley admitted as much in his memoir that they went and got it and took care of the diary, because he was then at that point beyond. He was an icon now. You can't challenge him. He was in the movie. You can't unmake the movie. So. And that reminds me, I think we were talking about this on the show a couple weeks ago when I was talking about Gary Condit, the guy whose mistress was killed in D.C. Park out jogging, and I couldn't remember her name. It's Chandra Levy. It came back to me after.
Chandra Levy, that's right.
And the point of that was, and this is where news suppression comes into play, is that her killer turned out not to be Gary Condit, the conservative Democrat from California. They always put that adjective in there, too.
Oh.
But rather a MS-13 gang member who's in the country illegally. There's a story we don't want told. So,
Oh, it's Chandra Levy.
Chandra Levy.
That's
I mean CH, but I say
Okay.
Chandra, from the Hebrew Chandra, meaning Levy in Jewish, in Hebrew. Wow. You didn't know that probably coming in here. You didn't know how many languages I mastered.
I mean, now I'm fluent in Yiddish,
Yeah.
but not
Hebrew. Yeah, no, that's a different. I've watched a couple TV shows and they're in Hebrew. So
because I think that mass that we go to is in Yiddish or something. Because I don't understand any of them.
No, it's like all Greek to me except it's Latin.
Oh. Anyway, yeah, 72 had all kinds of cloak and dagger going on.
Yeah,
I think.
Yes.
Looking at it in retrospect. And seeing how they're begging the question on a lot of these things, and they, it's almost like it's directly propaganda, and there's very little else in it to me.
Well, in 72, it was a lot easier to control the message because there were so few outlets that really had impact. If you got Life and if you got New York Times,
we had no idea.
Yeah, right.
And people still talk about what's his name like he was Mr. Objective down the middle of the fairway.
Cronkite.
Cronkite.
No, Walter Cronkite from
eugenicist.
St. Joseph, Missouri, University of Missouri Journalism School. He, after he left his job, I mean, he was there for 20, 30 years, I don't know. And he'd take his glasses off, you know, and as like a sign of
avuncularity.
Right. That was the thing.
Is that a word?
Yeah, it was avuncular, right?
Avuncularity.
Take his honor. JFK was John F. Kennedy, president, was shot today in Washington. He announced that, and he announced a lot of other things. He announced that we had lost the war. When he announced we lost the war in Vietnam.
I say we're losing the war in Vietnam.
Right.
Wow, what a shocker. We're losing the war in Vietnam. I knew when that bastard grew sideburns we were in trouble.
That was a sign. In the 70s, there's a lot of bad hair, a lot of bad fashion.
When Cronkite came out with the sideburns,
he was gone.
The war is lost.
He had gone woke. When he comes out, when he's after his CBS career is over, and I have the copies of his speeches. I've seen him say this. He goes, I can't believe I got away with it for all those years.
I know.
He goes, I was waiting for the roof to fall in on me any day. He was out at liberal fundraisers and total hard left Democrat.
There's a new, I think it's probably a website that's promoting itself as the most objective news source that you can get rid of all this propaganda and go to the objective, down the middle news source, just like Walter Cronkite. It's like, wow.
Yeah, that's for people who don't know their history, and it's out there. It's not even hard to find out. It reminds me of Jim Jones of Jonestown, who's a communist, who got into religion consciously as a way to influence. He said he was an out communist, and in his memoirs he said, I can't believe that I got away with this for so long. He would be at church saying, free at last, free at last. Thanks socialism almighty, we're free at last. He goes to Jonestown and everyone has to adopt a new name like Che Guevara or, Mao Zedong or something, and then when the media are talking about it, it was a religious scandal, right? It was a total communist indoctrination center in the middle of the friggin' jungle.
So they literally had him adopt new names?
Yeah.
Because I kind of think this is fun. I hadn't heard this before.
Yeah.
But, hey, there's kind of a whimsical upside to this whole, cultish communist indoctrination thing. I'd like to be Slobodan Milosevic.
That'd be a popular name.
I mean, these are great names.
Yeah.
Hosni Mubarak.
If you could pronounce them.
We could be... Yeah,
and they'd be like your code names and within the group. So, anyhow, that was there was so much. But what there wasn't in '72, there was no Rush Limbaugh, there was no Tucker Carlson, there was no Breitbart, no Daily Wire, no Dan Bongino, no Alex Jones. All we had was
Joe Payne.
There was Joe Payne, crazy one-legged
Alan Burke, Joe Payne.
Yeah. Joe Payne was, it was interesting because I remember Joe Payne. He was sort of a predecessor. They thought that when Rush came along, he'd be like Joe Payne.
Right.
But Joe Payne was just kind of a wild man. He's more of the Alex Jones school.
Yeah, much more of a. Actually, he was more of a Springer. There was a little more, Donahue, Springer,
theater,
something in there. Theater, yeah. And of course, the funniest interview was the one with Frank Zappa.
I don't recall that one.
It was like on the Mike Douglas show or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
Had Zappa and Joe Payne on the same show. Zappa had already been on and done his shtick, and Joe Payne, they played up the little antipathy for the audience. You
Right.
know, I'm the hip, you're the old gnarly conservative. So, you know, they tossed a few light, mild insults back and forth to each other, and then Joe Pine,
Right, yeah, sorry.
that was my mistake too.
And I confirmed it.
Yeah, Joe Pine says to Zappa, he said something about, well, with that long hair of yours, I'm liable to think you're a woman. And Zappa goes, well, you got a wooden leg and I don't think you're a table.
That's a great line.
It was.
You
Really
don't get
mean.
many chances to use that
No,
line.
it's like, where'd you have that in your back pocket? It's like wooden leg insults. Something nobody ever does, right? Because you're assuming it's the war.
Right, yeah, right.
Hey,
Yeah.
let me make some wooden leg jokes.
You know, and I have an observation in regard to that maybe you could help me with. Totally off the subject, right? And you know,
We do that all the time.
I'm utterly sympathetic to people who have prosthetic limbs, and many of them have gotten it in very, pretty agonizing ways.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand why people with, like, let's say, typically I'm talking about from a knee on down leg, right?
Why do they wear shorts?
Why do they wear shorts?
Yeah, well, this is a Jack Cashill and Loy Edge enigmatic moment where we ask you, the viewer,
Right.
please tell us.
Call in at 1-800-Upstream and tell us.
What's the deal?
Yeah, right.
Trying to get a tan?
No,
Knock it off.
Yeah. I mean, I see it all the time, and I don't see, prosthetic limbs all the time, but when you see that, then you're forced either to comment or not comment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, I'm the same
you're
way.
either looking away or commenting on it.
I'm old school.
Yeah.
And when it comes to men, I'm that way about shorts.
Why do men wear shorts?
I'm constantly asking myself, why does that guy wear shorts?
Well,
It's like, why do you want to tan those leathery, veiny, hairless, shiny little sticks that you have called legs? Is it that hot that you have to gross everybody out?
it's odd that you say that because this morning I was my office is in Westport, which is a home to the homeless, if you can have homeless have a home, and to the countercultural crowd and whatnot, and various
It smells
vagabonds.
like incense
Yeah.
and peppermint.
And here comes a guy walking down the street with like one of some of the skinniest legs I've ever seen on a white guy. And he's a middle-aged guy, very well groomed, with his shirt tucked into his shorts, right? And he has those little teeny socks on so that you look like you don't have any socks on, right?
Oh, those are real clever, sneaky.
And to me, he was like, he might as well have had a banner saying, "Mug me." He looked so vulnerable. Like he had wandered off the golf course and ended up in Westport through some horrible mutation, in time machine or something. But you're right. I'm looking and saying, why are you dressed like that here in Westport?
I think those sockless socks with the little balls on the back are probably the most mug me thing I can imagine you could put on.
I would say it screams mug me. And
You're trying to get a perfect. Okay, here's the deal. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to get a perfect tan on my legs,
right.
to my ankles, and then my feet will be white. But at least my ankles and feet won't be white. That's bad.
That's bad. You have a farmer's tan on your legs, right?
Right down to your feet.
Yeah.
It's like, that's way better than if the tan line was a little high. I don't get the math.
I don't
makes
get the
no
aesthetics.
sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Plus they're, they have limited function, these little teeny socks. Like where regular socks, you wear them all the time. You can wear them under clothes or, without
They
under
look,
shorts or whatever.
Yeah.
And in 1972, men were...
They didn't have those damn things in 72. I was there. They didn't make them. They made something called PEDs for women,
Right.
but they were sock liners.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, I remember as a kid, we wouldn't wear shorts. We thought that was like beneath our dignity to wear shorts.
Little Lord Fauntleroy wore shorts.
Yeah. Or, in England during the Blitz, they wore shorts because they would rather the kids scrape their knees than cut the hole in their trousers, But that's the world it was. But, actually it's, and we're just grazing here on 1972. We'll have to have Sherman and Mr. Peabody come back some other time, maybe to finish out the year or to explore another year in its various mutations. Just one final note. As if you were conservative in 1972, the only person you could look to as your role model
Jr.
who was so CIA'd up.
What a scam. Yeah, that was really something.
Who validates all of your theses here,
He does.
But he was vaguely entertaining in his own way.
Well, he was. He was good.
And we'll be back without William Buckley next week. And that was a good invitation. It's not too bad. For you,
For me.
Yeah, you're not too bad at it. Hey, Loy, thanks a lot. We're here at Real Media Studios, and we'll be back next week at the same place, same time, whatever time that is that you choose to zoom in on us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever we are.
WND,
right, on Friday morning. So, hey, thanks a lot, everyone. We'll be back. Take care, Loy. Bye-bye.